when I go to meetings, and now I'm like on it. Hey, Mom. She passed away. She's not really. She's still on it.
So did she just step out?
Yeah.
I was just asking, I was like, weren't we promised refreshments? I came all the way to the south side of here. Like my Uber was $18.
It's here. Lots of different M&Ms. Is that what I see? I don't think it is. Do I see M&Ms?
No, it's like nuts.
Healthy. Ish. It's gonna be like at the movie. Does anybody know? Are we being recorded?
Robert.
Shoot.
And that's okay. Just a second. We can mute in a second. Something.
It's not very long.
Yeah, very quiet.
Should we start? All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate it. I'm Nick Johnson. I'm the director of the Tax Revision Commission. We are live streaming, we are recording, and just so you all know, this thing in the middle, if you haven't met one of those before, it's an owl. It is recording. It is our speaker. It is our camera. It is our microphone for today. We've had some issues on some of the other meetings about sound quality, and it seems like if you are not projecting directly at it, you're less likely to have your words recorded. So it's one reason we're all down towards this end. So do everything you can to speak up. This room can sort of feel dead and quiet, and like you just sort of want to sink into an afternoon, sort of low tone of voice. So we're going to try to be lively, especially because we're talking about tax policy, so we want to be lively. I am delighted to be joined by Mayor Williams, Chair of the Commission, who will have a few words of welcome in a moment. Erica Williams, member of the Commission. We've got a couple of commissioners who are several commissioners who are out of town this week, unfortunately. And I know at least one is 8 minutes away or something now.
Yes.
Yes, she's on her way, but fortunately we are recording and taking minutes so everybody can catch up. The purpose of this conversation, and I'm going to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves and say a little bit about why you're here, perspectives you're bringing, and the statements that I know several of you have submitted in a moment. But I want to start with a bit of an overview of like why we're doing these sessions. So I think you all know that every 10 years, the council and the mayor appoint this commission to do a careful review of the tax system. Now, the last tax commission back in 2013, it did advance many major changes, and many of which the council and mayor adopted. So we're following in big shoes. And at the same time, we know that a lot has changed since the last commission 10 years ago. And particularly over the last few years, the economy is different, the tax base is different, community priorities have changed. So we have a really important opportunity now via this commission to rethink the tax system from top to bottom. Our mandate is to propose to the mayor and the council a set of recommendations for better tax policy. And specifically, the commission has adopted a framework of guiding principles or guiding the work of the whole. So we have committed that in our work, we will, number one, follow the data and base our recommendations on sound research. Two, that our work will be shaped by the experiences and needs of people across the district from a variety of perspectives. And three, that we will work collaboratively to ensure bold and thoughtful changes. And, folks on the commission represent a variety of perspectives, and the intent is for the commission to work together to come into alignment around ideas that are good policy. So in our recommendations, the commission has agreed as a body that we aim to achieve all of the following. One, a broader resilient tax base for a post-COVID economy, to protect against economic shifts and shocks, and ensure future funding for high-quality public services, and to share tax burdens fairly across the community. 2, progressivity and racial equity, to eliminate racial disparities, protect low-income residents, and lift up a middle class. 3, economic efficiency and competitiveness, to advance growth and prosperity for all residents. And 4, simple and open and fair administrative processes in order to reduce compliance burdens for residents and businesses. And as we're going through our work, we will be assessing our proposals against those principles. And I know that some of you are members of or representing the Fair Budget Coalition, and so I just want to flag for you that in particular, we will be assessing racial equity to the extent they allow us to do so for all of our proposals. So let me give you a sense of where we are in the arc of our work. Over the last 3 weeks, we have convened approximately 10 meetings with small groups of key stakeholders such as yourselves, who we think can bring key points of perspective into the deliberations. We're also holding 2 public meetings. We had one Monday night this week, an in-person meeting at 8. We have a virtual meeting Thursday, at which members of the general public can present their perspectives. And we're planning additional sessions for the summer. And our job, the Commission's job in all these sessions, is to listen and to learn. We haven't ruled anything in. Now, in the course of our work so far, we've heard about the number of challenges facing our tax system, and the challenges are wide and varied, and they don't all lead directly or clearly to solutions. Some are technically difficult, some involve complicated trade-offs. We've heard about it. We have a long list of possible policy options, and we're continuing to grow and develop that list. At our meeting last night, I shared an updated list, and I'll be updating that list again after we hear from you all in the other stakeholder sessions. And so as we start to refine that list, as we start to expand it on an ongoing basis, I really invite all of you and others to respond and to comment on the ideas that get put forward. In the fall, the Commission is going to begin to really start digging in and narrowing down a list of potential policy options. And the intent is that by December, to agree to a final package of recommendations to present to the Council, so that potentially it can be considered as part of the next budget cycle. We're doing our best to be transparent, to put all of our options on the website as we discuss them, and to stream to the extent technology allows us. But we know we have a hard job. The last Tax Revision Commission did an amazing job of putting together a bunch of diverse ideas, and we aim to do that as well, and to put out ideas that in fact the Council and the Mayor will find helpful in their work. So, as I said, today's conversation is about listening and learning from you. Really happy to answer questions that you might have for us about our work, and hear your suggestions about how we can do it better. Our main purpose really is to collect your ideas. So you're not going to hear a lot of opinions from us, even if we think you present a really terrific idea or a really terrible idea. We might ask probing questions, but I really encourage you not to read too much into that, because we're really trying to pressure test all the ideas that come before us. So in a moment, I'll invite each of you to share a little bit about yourselves, your name, organizational affiliation, or pronouns, if you're comfortable sharing those, and a short summary of what community or perspective you represent at this table, and your priorities and ideas for the work of the Commission. And so we'll go around and we'll give each of you a chance to speak, and then we'll open up for Q&A. We really want this to be as much of a conversation and discussion as possible. I don't think right now we have any commissioners online. Oh, Carolyn, right? Perfect timing. I don't think we have any, but sometimes some tune in partway through, and I'll let you know if that occurs. we did send out a list of questions in advance, but we're really not going to stick to those particularly rigidly. It's going to be more responding to the things you say. And then after this will be posted on our website, and we'll be taking minutes and posting those as well. And so if you didn't yet have a chance to submit a statement, you're welcome to do so, in the future, and that'll become part of the record. I did introduce Mike Hageman and Becky Strauss, are also part of the Tax Commission staff. So let me stop there and turn it over to Mayor Williams to say a few words.
Hey, everybody, I'm Tony Williams, chair of the commission. I served as mayor, as you know. It was during the Grant administration, but just welcome everybody here because, and I wanted to be here personally because I one thing that the public engagement component of the tax commission is very important because one, we want to hear from all the folks who are involved in making DC a better community. And two, we want to use it as a teaching moment. And I also want to be here because I am the director of the Federal City Council, which is pretty much a business group. And I thought it was important for me to be here personally to hear from folks with a different perspective because both are valuable for us. So thank you for being here. Look forward to hearing from you along the lines that we heard from Nick, and I'll turn it over to my fellow staff to make any comments they want to make.
Very good. So we will begin. Oh, is she one of our panelists today?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Does she need to go sooner?
I don't know, you wanna ask her?
Liana, did you need to go, did you need to get in early to? That help?
Yes, okay, she wants to go first?
Awesome.
Well, we can.
We have another commissioner.
No, oh, she's on mute.
My apologies for being late. We can't hear you yet.
So you didn't miss anything.
Diane, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear everybody. I'm not were you all waiting for all the commissioners to be introduced before I go?
One stepped in. Suzanne is
Okay.
here. So we are all set and we are ready for you to go, and we'd love to be here. Again, I will say the other thing is that one thing we've learned from the course of doing these stakeholder meetings is we very much appreciate it when people are succinct, and if you brought a statement to read, I won't tell you can't do it, but I would encourage you to speak briefly, land your points, and then let us get into conversation. So with that, why don't you go ahead, Diane?
That sounds awesome because I am a person of few words and more action. So I'm Deanna Forster. I'm the president of the Metro Washington Labor Council. Thank you all so much for inviting me and allowing me to shift my schedule around today. I do think that some of our affiliate unions will also be before you to answer questions more detailed about the industries, but I cover a number of workers in every industry, from government workers, public sector, the school systems, our sanitation workers. I come out of the grocery store workers union, UFCW, and I also and we also represent nurses, all the industries. So they're all affiliate with our council. So I would just say that as we go into this conversation, I look forward to addressing any questions and concerns about industry related things, as far as we're looking as creating taxes and tax breaks and incentives to bring revenue back to the district, but then also opportunities to help people of color, people that are struggling to stay in the city, like myself and my family. I'm a proud resident of Ward 7. The rest of my family has moved out to Prince George's County. So I do think that one thing that we are definitely in line with having the racial equity lens, but also want to consider the workforce. There was a point in time that people were able to buy homes and maintain homes in the districts because of tax breaks. We also know that quality education is tied very closely to economic development. You know, if anybody's ever read the book about savage equality, but if you ever want to have a thriving community, schools attract those communities. And the way that we make sure we have quality education is we have great teachers that live in those communities. So thinking about the type of tax incentives and opportunities we can create to get people not only to work in DC, but live in DC. As we know, it's very expensive We also represent police officers and firefighters, government workers, that are, what we have seen are long time homeowners, and also 32BJ, who represents a lot of janitor and workers. They have a large number of members that live in the District of Columbia, and they also work at many universities, but they are struggling to stay in their homes due to either rent control or the rising costs. So looking at opportunities with revising the tax structure to make it easier for workers to live in the district is something that we're looking at. I would say the one last thing is, we do know that, and you don't hear this always from unions, but I put my Ward 7 lifelong DC resident hat on as well, is we do want to see small businesses have the opportunity to thrive in the district. And we know that they need a lot more support. And I know that even us as a small business that have to go through the Clean Hands program, and we think that it's the right effort to make sure that our people are accountable to the District of Columbia, and have to pay fines and aren't able to do business unless they're in good standing. But we do believe that at the same time, they're large corporations, industries that are doing well and that are that can pay a higher tax, and small businesses can be given tax breaks and incentives versus having to pay those same costs and burdens as large corporations, especially when they're national corporations and not locally based. So those are the two thoughts that I'm coming into this process with the ability to do a quick round with our affiliates and things that they're concerned about.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
I said earlier, we should start this way, so why don't I bring to you?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jamila White. I go by the pronouns of she, her. Happy to be with you all. I am an ANC commissioner in Ward 8. I represent 8805, that is Anacostia community, and I'm also the chair of 8A, DC's only Black women, all Black women commission. Happy to be here representing my community in that capacity, and I'm also a small business owner. I'm a co-owner of a racial justice and Black liberation social impact organization that focuses on bringing communities together for greater self-determination. And some of the work that we did over the last 2 years has been pulling together Ward 8 to revision and redream of what our community should look like when we have equitable investment. And not only a seat at the table, but a driver at that table. So I'm bringing a lot of information from more than 1,500 residents that we pulled together in various town halls and working groups to look at the future of our community through a project called the Ward 8 Community Collective. Just kind of going back to my ANC role, Anacostia will be the most gentrified community in Ward 8, Anacostia and St. Elizabeth. I've said that in Congress Heights, I've said this to people all the time. I will not be surprised in 10 years if Anacostia looks like Shaw. And I say that to mean where the population has dropped from 90% Black to 30% Black if we do not immediately, within the next 18 months, put forth protection for the Black community. The large population, like our colleague Diana, I think Deanna said.
Deanna.
It's this, the issues facing DC are very much racialized, are very much anti-Black when you look at the data and break down disaggregate the data across all levels. It's DC's Black low-income population, but also working class and middle class families that are being pushed out and displaced at high levels because they cannot afford to remain in the district. We lost commissioners last year. The reason why we're only Black commissioners is because we lost a male commissioner who was expanding his family. And even with 2 middle-income working adults, one working for DC government, could not afford a house in our community because there was nothing for under $600,000. So you have a community where average income is $35,000. Home purchases now are averaging $500,000 and up. That's not for us. And that's not for many of the Black families that live in our community and across the district. And so we can get into that a little bit more on why taking not only a racial equity, but a justice lens is critical in understanding what justice is. And sometimes it may not seem fair, but fair is where people go with children to look at clowns and ride games. But we're talking about justice here, which is different from fairness. And so I think that for the past 400 years of this country, the past 250 years of this district, We have not taken the justice lens, and most of the progress has been at the expense of Black people and Indigenous people. We have a small opportunity to start turning things around where we have public support and public financing to do so. So I think we have to be bold, courageous, and radical in doing everything we can within the bounds of the law and looking into changing the law, because one thing that I remember is none of this is natural. All of this is man-made. Race is man-made. These decisions, these laws, capitalism, everything was things somebody sat at a table like this and decided to do. And we sit here and continue. So just as someone made this, we have the opportunity and a responsibility to change it, to unmake it. Adrienne Marie Brown reminds us we're living in someone else's imagination. I like to say their nightmare, our nightmare. So we have the responsibility. There's no extraterrestrial natural force bounding us to keep systems the way it is. And COVID showed us that. When the world stopped, we didn't end. We didn't blow up. There was no self-combustion. We changed, we evolved. And we have to remember, we're here to evolve, we're here to progress. And as human beings, we have the power to do that. And most importantly, in DC, we have the resources to do that. We are abundance rich. We are resource rich. There's no reason in the nation's capital where decisions are made for every country around the world that Black Washingtonians are living in the conditions that we are living in. And not just Black Washingtonians, but I will be very specific, Black Native Washingtonians, more specific, Black Native Washingtonians who attend the DCPS public schools, when you want to break down the disparities even more. So going back to my colleague's point around the importance of public education. So it's very targeted, and therefore we need to take a targeted response in centering those who have been the greatest impacted as we look to doing this work. We're one of the 7th richest cities in the world, I believe, not just the country. And so the resources is not a problem. Those resources. Right now, our city has wealth concentrated in certain communities, primarily those west of the Anacostia River in wards 2 and 3, and primarily poverty concentrated east of the Anacostia River. There is no concentration of white poverty in DC. No white students were expelled from DC schools last year. For the last 3 years, no white students were expelled. I actually had to do statistics to see if DC had white children, which they do. I'm sorry. Everything I go to is just focusing on Black children and the investments and the achievements that are not happening. I had to see if DC had white students, white children, and we do. We have a large population of white students. But it's mind-blowing. What other jurisdiction around the country no white students are expelled from school at all the entire year? We are living in what I call one of the most pro-Black, anti-Black places I've ever been, and that's very controversial, but the data backs it up. And we have the opportunity through tax policy and zoning policy to start changing this, because it was tax and zoning policy and housing policies that put us in this position to begin with, as well as labor policies. So I'm gonna stop my charade there, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here.
So I'm LaDon Love. I'm the Executive Director of Spaces in Action, and our organization is building power with Black, Latin, and immigrant communities across DC. Our office is based in Ward 4, but we work in Ward 4, 5, 7, 8, and also in 6. I left out that number. As an example of how so many agencies in DC seem to not know how to count, I figured I'd go out of order there as well. So one of the things I think I wanted to comment, can you tell me your name?
I'm Nick.
Nick. So Nick, you mentioned earlier, one of the things that this commission is responsible for is making sure that there's fairness or quality in how taxes are done. What I want to argue is that we need equity. Equity is not about everybody paying the same amount, but those who have more doing more. And we need to make sure that there's more resources going into the communities that need them. The two speakers right before me both mentioned how there's disparities in how resources are given out in communities. And we need to make sure that we begin to level the playing field. And the only way to do that is to raise the floor by making sure that those who have more do more. So when I think about that, I want to build also on the issue of the child tax credit. The child tax credit, as we know, made a big difference. It brought a lot of children out of poverty, and children that were in deep poverty were able to raise up as well. That went away, and now families are trying to struggle to make ends meet. And then the public health emergency, but we know we're recovering, we're not through it. A lot of programs have now been defunded, and a lot of resources and services that families had are no longer there. So we have a lot of people in crisis. What can we do to make things better? And what is DC going to do to make sure it takes care of its people? And its people includes the children, and I like to say our children, because the children of DC belong to all of us, and we need to make sure that they are taken care of. And we do that by making sure that the families who nurture them are being taken care of. One way that can happen is to make sure that we have a DC child tax credit. We know that people who earn less money, they get that money and they take care of necessities. So we put more money in the pockets of people who are low-income workers and low-income, period. We're going to see a big boost in the economy because they go out and buy the resources that they need. That goes back to building the businesses and making sure that people are better off. So I want to make sure that DC has a child tax credit. Whatever you could do to make sure that the earned income tax credit that's being expanded to include immigrant workers who are undocumented, I want to make sure that that happens as well. That process needs to unfold seamlessly so that people can have those resources. Again, it will help the economy of DC. We look at the national level, and there's bills coming from both Congress and the Senate. It's going to be an ugly fight. We already know that. But DC relies heavily on resources from the federal government. So DC needs to be thinking, what can we do locally to make sure we're raising resources? So I'm going to close by saying, let's make sure that there's equity, not just fairness, in how tax structures are put together. People who earn more should pay more. People who own more should pay more to make sure that everyone's taken care of. 2, let's get a child tax credit in DC so that families have more resources and they can get a credit back and not worry about losing programs that they're on. Whereas just giving more money may not work in the same way. And let's make sure that this earned income tax credit is rolled out seamlessly. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name's Yael. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the DC director for Jews United for Justice. We're a community of thousands of Jews and allies in the district, and we're committed to advancing social, racial, and economic justice in DC. For the sake of brevity, I am going to read my statement because if I didn't, I would go on far too long. I want to talk about JUFJ represents probably like quite a different group to the groups that have been previously mentioned by the panelists. We are some of those people, not exclusively, but overwhelmingly on the other side of the Anacostia, even in wards 2 and 3, who have, some of the wealth that is concentrated. Many of our members are white and are people who are committed to changing the district and making it a more fair, equitable place. That includes their role in it being paying more, doing more, and giving more. I want to start by getting something clear. The overwhelming majority of JUFJers don't choose to live in the DC because of low tax rates. We live here because we want to be in a thriving city with strong communities, vibrant culture, public transportation, much, much more. We also want to live in a place that invests in the collective well-being of the community. It's important for us to live in a place that uses its resources in a just and equitable way. With the right investments, we can make moves to change the way the district works and actually repair historic harm, historic inequality, and move towards a system of racial equity. While there are many ways in which the revenue that we need can be raised through a more equitable tax code, many of which I think fellow panelists are lifting up or have lifted up, I want to particularly focus on taxation of household and individual wealth. Again, this is something that I think particularly fits around like who JUFJ members are. So firstly, I think DC should tax high value homes by introducing a more progressive property tax that taxes higher value homes at higher rates. Many newer homeowners in the district, and we see a lot of these amongst our membership, are able to own their homes because of inherited wealth which was primarily built from government programs that allowed their parents and grandparents to buy homes at affordable prices. Others, primarily Black people in the district and beyond, have been denied those same opportunities due to racism embedded in both government programs and private financial institutions. And during the pandemic, and even before then, many homeowners saw their property values dramatically increase. And as property values continue to rise, this has a potential to be a large source of revenue for the district that can be used to address historic inequalities in the ability for Black residents to build generational wealth. It can also stabilize housing in the district and fund anti-displacement infrastructure that ensures long-time Black residents aren't pushed out of their homes. Secondly, I think we should tax extreme wealth. The district has long taxed wealth at lower rates than income. It makes it easier for those who already have substantial wealth to maintain and build their wealth, whilst having a negative impact on lower and middle income residents. This is demonstrated by the fact, as previously mentioned, that a small fraction of a percent of households in DC hold nearly half of all the wealth. Taxing extreme wealth and using the revenue to invest in historically under-resourced communities would begin to counter some of the historical disinvestment in those communities. And lastly, we should be open to increasing income taxes on the highest earners to fund vital services. We were really involved in the Just Recovery campaign and push for the Homes and Hearts Amendment in 2021 that increased taxes on the wealthiest incomes in the district in order to fund vital programs such as pay supplements for childcare teachers, housing for unhoused neighbors, and many of our community members spoke out as people who would be directly impacted by those increased taxes. And I actually want to quote one of our members who wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post at the time, talking about his desire to actually pay more in taxes. He wrote, "I've continued in my job for more than 10 years. I've received promotions and raises and prospered. My income plus my investments and income from stocks that relatives gave to me have put me in the 95th percentile of earners in DC. I say this not to brag, but to highlight that we have been extremely fortunate and we have more than we need." And this was at the height of the pandemic, when many, many people in the district were struggling to live day to day. And people like Lou, who is an incredible advocate, was talking about how his income, his wealth only went up during that time. This is very much not a unique story. And I think we want to reflect on during the pandemic and to this day, our city has suffered shocks. And I know there was a question about how the city can be more resistant to those shocks. Our public services are hit, commercial revenue streams from downtown are at risk, and yet wealthy households in the city have maintained and in many cases grown their wealth during that time. So I think we really need to look at taxing and for wealthy households to pay their share, because there is a clear stability in that place of wealth that we should be talking about, and a potential for a more stable revenue source that can help us in times of shocks when we need it. I will leave it there, but thank you very much. Excited to chat.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Falcon. I'm the Executive Director of DC Jobs with Justice, and I hope that my cold is not going to disrupt my testimony. I use she, her pronouns. DC Jobs with Justice is a dynamic coalition of labor organizations, community groups, faith-based organizations, and student groups dedicated to protecting the rights of working people, supporting community struggles, and promoting racial justice to build a more just society here in Washington, DC. I'm going to talk about one big idea on an issue that we focus on a lot, and then a couple of other points that I think other folks have raised, which is I think an opportunity for this commission is to address the misclassification of workers as a problem in the tax code. So at Jobs with Justice, we do a lot around wage theft. And what happens, like, there are plenty of independent contractors in DC that are real independent contractors, right? The people you hire to do your retreat or like graphic designer or whatever. But then there are all the people who are cleaning hotel rooms, who are working on construction sites, that are being misclassified as independent contractors. And as a result, their bosses are not paying into unemployment benefits, they're not paying into the paid family leave program. And then those workers have the burden of paying their own half, right, of their Social Security and their payroll tax. Some, I'm sure, don't pay it, so that's just money that's lost. And then to the extent they do pay it, right, they have a 15% tax burden rather than the 7.5. Gig workers, additionally, like, they're kind of in a gray area that so far is where the idea that they're independent contractors is generally still considered like legal. But DC could expand the ABC test, which is used only on construction sites right now, but that has kind of a like strict definition of what it means to be an independent contractor, that you direct your own time, you use your own materials, things like that. And really clarify to what extent like platform workers like should be paying tax, like the companies that rely on platform workers should be paying taxes into DC. this could go a long way into, like, you know, one of the things we learned, one of my other recommendations is to learn from the pandemic response, like how we maintain economic security for people in when times are tough. Having a more generous unemployment system, unemployment insurance payout would be one of those ways. If we were actually capturing unemployment payments from all of these folks, unemployment insurance payments from all of these employers, especially folks like Uber and Lyft and everybody else that I don't need to name, like, that could really shore up the ability to be more generous with workers and potentially take pressure off of the folks who've been paying into those systems. So that's my big idea. Like, we generally think of misclassification as something that's under the responsibility of DOES, but it is also a tax violation. So I would encourage this commission to think about how we can use Office of Tax and Revenue to be a stronger enforcement arm on misclassification. And, you know, I guess the other thing to say about that is that in these like low wage jobs where people are being misclassified, it is a huge percentage of them are people who are undocumented, right? People who like don't believe that they can get job security in other ways. And almost entirely are people of color, immigrants, and folks for whom English isn't the first language. So that's my big pitch. Otherwise, I echo the sentiments that a fair tax code is one that improves racial equity. I think in terms, like, we need to be thinking more about how we're taxing our large institutions. Stronger payments in lieu of taxes for folks like universities who sit on all this land that DC is then not able to tax is an important way to do that. Another component of that is, you know, we could design pilots to ensure that they provide benefits for the district if, rather than like payment in lieu of taxes in lieu of other benefits. But, you know, I'm thinking right now about the fact that George Washington University Hospital, the nurses are unionizing, right? So like, how could we be using pilots to incentivize the requirement that the union, like that the institution, sorry, I wrote this down. I'm just gonna read it. What did I say? Voluntary recognition of the union and other worker benefits could factor into how we set pilots. Use progressive tax structures for graduated income tax, but also to the point that Deanna was making and Jamila, like, I think we need to talk about this, also about how we're using progressive tax structures for our businesses so that small businesses and large businesses are not necessarily being treated the same. We work on rent control in DC, we've worked on the tip minimum wage, like the Jose Andres restaurants and, you know, the restaurants in my neighborhood in Brightwood really are gonna fare differently with the tip minimum wage being eliminated. Tip minimum wage needs to be eliminated. How's the tax code gonna make sure to really treat those institutions appropriately based on their need, not with a broad brush. I think we need a commission to study and make recommendations for the downtown recovery that's intersectional and doesn't simply come out of either this or the budget. It's too big a problem for too many people to kind of be doing it in the ad hoc way that I feel like it's happening right now. And then, as I said earlier, we should learn from the federal responses to the COVID emergency, as LaDawn mentioned. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
I want to say hi. My name is Catherine Landfield. I'm the advocacy coordinator for Fair Budget Coalition. My name is on this list, but I was asked to come later, but I couldn't bear to miss this. So I'm here. I'm amazed by the power and the depth of ideas. 4 different presentations, 4 amazing ways of thinking about this that are typically not how we normally talk about taxation, how we normally talk about how do we do this work. So if you want me to like do my thing now, I can, otherwise I was gonna do it later, but as an audience member, I'm just blown away by, I wanted to just be clapping and cheering. So thank you so much. So I should go. Okay. So.
No, Deanna.
That's already just.
Okay, so, I will flag that Glenn Lee, the Chief Financial Officer for the district, who's also a member of the commission, is online. Sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
Okay, so, I come to this work as a very privileged white woman who was raised in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and now for the past, I don't know, 30-something years has lived a half a mile down the road in Upper Northwest. I'm a lifelong social worker. I was working almost exclusively with Black and Brown families in DC who I loved very, very much. And after almost 30 years of doing that work, I said, you know what, this is crazy. My families are suffering mightily from all the same issues. These are not individual problems. These are structural problems that they're facing. So as much as I love this work, I cannot keep doing it through direct services. I have to move to policy change. I have to move to a way of helping them that relates to actually changing the circumstances that we're living in. And like Jamila said, we are not constrained by some invisible force that prevents us from making these shifts. So that's how I ended up eventually coming to Fair Budget Coalition, which is an organization that we are a coalition of advocates, individual members, impacted community members, and we take our role very seriously of fighting for a fair budget. Taxation fits very much alongside of that. You cannot have a fair budget without having adequate revenues. I also am a volunteer with JUFJ. So I have like 8,000 different thoughts I would like to share. But I think I will start just by saying that my city has not asked any sacrifice from me. I have not been asked to step up in any way as people's lives have been falling apart during the pandemic. I married a guy who I met when I was 17. I never thought he'd be a high earner, but he is. We're very comfortable. Pandemic was a little bit like, I mean, I hate to say this as I'm being recorded, but it's actually true. It was like a family retreat. We were home, we were safe, we were comfortable. We had a neighborhood with beautiful green trees. We went for walks, we cooked together. The difference between security and economic inclusion and the difference that compared to precarity and economic exclusion, it's just impossible. It is impossible to imagine how great that gap is. And having worked for so long with families who were on the other side, I know that my experience was just profoundly different. So I really believe that, you know, being somebody from a demographic that should be much higher taxed, I say, please tax us more highly. My neighbors are comfortable. We would be able to still maintain a solid quality of life, even with higher taxes. Like, it's just a very different thing to ask somebody, you know, right now we're working on the budget, and the cuts to essential services have been so profound. The cuts to eviction prevention, the cuts to food assistance, to legal services to prevent evictions. We are looking at tens of thousands, like 50,000 households facing potential eviction. So anyway, I say all that to say that families are sacrificing for the sake of a balanced budget. It should not, a budget should not exist on the backs of the poor. Poverty should not be purely racialized. There's no reason why I don't know a single white poor person. That's craziness. And so all these things come together, and taxation is this amazing lever to start reversing some of those things that we're talking about. So I will end there. I apologize if I went on too long, but this is a really big, important deal. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you all. Really appreciate all those thoughts you guys bring to me, perspectives, and appreciate your just being here and bringing new and varied perspectives to how the tax code can affect the community. So thank you. I want to stop and open it up for questions for you all from the commission. Yesha is dying to, usually a shy and tying Violet back there, but in this case. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Really great to be able to hear from you. Questions for you. I was wondering if you have any examples of states that where the tax offices do enforce types of, classification that you mentioned.
I came up with this brilliant idea like 2 days ago and didn't have time to look more deeply into that side, but I will be happy to look and get back to the commission.
I wanted to just share one thing with you, that there is one high school in DC where 47% of our white public school students are Catholic. Just one. So that blew my mind psychologically.
Yeah.
Ms. White, you spoke of such passion, and I appreciate that. You mentioned that you're concerned about the protection for Blacks in your ward. You sort of alluded to protection in regards to housing. Can you give some other information or variables that you're looking for protection and how that would relate to the tax revision work that you're doing?
No, thank you for that question. So one of the things that has just always been so clear to me, and my mom comes from the housing industry, that's why I know a lot more, but it's the greatest driver of wealth and it's the greatest driver of poverty. Housing is the #1 determinant of your social and economic outcomes, and it's very much racialized. And so we're in a community that's rapidly developing, and oftentimes, sometimes it's reflected, the community doesn't want the development. The community has been begging for development for decades, but for it to be inclusive development. And so with some of the major developments that are happening, we're gonna start seeing prices go up, and there are more than they are now. And the council's office on racial equity, they did an analysis on the new St. Elizabeth's Hospital development. And their analysis said pretty much that if the plan continues as is, it will displace more long-term Black DC residents. That got approved after it went through this core review. So it's these types of decisions that are being made, and a lot of that are tax breaks that are directly going to those developers to build that huge hospital, where a lot of the workers are not gonna come, the high-income workers are not gonna come from Ward 8. They're not gonna come from the district at all. They're gonna come from other communities, the doctors, the nurses, and other staff force, because most of our population is not at that capacity to take on those type of jobs. They'll be much more the clerical, the cleaning, the low service jobs that are not gonna pay very much to even stay in the community. So we have, land use policies that are happening with zoning decisions, tax breaks, and then not looking at the impact on communities when CORE did a 48-hour assessment and said, if you continue with this package, you're gonna displace long-term Black residents. And that's gonna have a trickle effect between Congress Heights and Anacostia. So in Anacostia, you also have the largest concentration of Black businesses in the historic Anacostia Business District. Right now, most businesses are struggling to survive with all of the development that's coming. And because we know most small businesses are struggling to survive anyway. I'm a small business owner. We're very fortunate to have 2 employees and not 1, but still, our businesses can't compete. It's hard for them to get district procurements. We saw DC just released this Black business disparity study that showed the disparity between white businesses and Black businesses, and even those, and not just Black, but people of color businesses, and even the ones that were going to people of color was only going to a handful of people of color. So all these tax incentives and breaks that we're giving out, they're still very much racialized. They're not going to the communities where are most impacted, and then our communities can't get in. We can't even get a piece of that pie, to say. And if we get a piece of the pie, it's usually for maybe a paint job or removing the dirt or pouring gravel. It's not for actually construction and the major opportunities. So housing is the greatest driver of wealth, and then business ownership is the next driver. We're hurting Black, Indigenous, migrant families, Latin families on all those fronts, because it's all being given to not just primarily one race, but one class of people who have the access already. Like for myself, as a small business owner, I do not compete for any grants or any contracts that's very grassroots, because I have higher privilege and access than some of my other businesses. And I help my neighbors compete for that. I don't compete against that because we have higher access and we can go for other things. And then just even as a small business, even to try to get, some of these certifications, it costs like $5,000 for some of these certifications. I can't apply. They were like, well, your business is in, a HUD inclusion zone. That's $2,000. Then it's another $5,000 for the minority business. And then if you want to be women, it's almost $10,000 to get these certificates to say, I am marginalized. So let me pay $10,000 to prove I'm marginalized so I can get favor on a graveling contract. And I know that's not like entirely a tax issue, but that's how the city generates revenue as well. And we're looking at all of these barriers from both the business side and the housing side, and let alone, let's not talk, the income side, where Black residents from different classes down, except very, very high earners, high asset, are really, it's hard to have a fighting chance. I can't move. If I sell my house right now, I can't rebuy my house, and I can't move in Anacostia anywhere. I maybe could move to Bellevue or Congress Heights, but wait 3 years, and I'm in PG County because I'm a small business owner and my income doesn't increase at the same rate that housing properties are. It's ridiculous. I cannot repurchase my own home, and I am in the same position like so many people, but yet we are the most privileged. We are still very, very privileged because we have so many neighbors who buying isn't even a possibility. They're just trying to stay in and find somewhere that they can rent.
I'm not sure that I understand your comments about the protected classes and spending thousands of dollars to get a
So
certificate.
when you're like a small, the small business certification, to get the certification if you want to get federal or government procurement. So if you want to get government procurements and like,
I was a government contractor for more than 25 years.
oh, so you already know. So I just paid.
I don't understand the cost that you're paying. We'll talk about.
Well, I'll tell you later. The costs are ridiculous to get certified for women-owned, minority-owned, small business.
SBA.
I did self-certify, but to get for the 8, we can talk.
You talking about AA, that's
Yeah.
a specific AA requirement, yeah. But I have mine on my own, I didn't pay that.
Oh, I've already paid like.
Yeah. Yeah, because I wasn't quite sure.
But I wasn't doing all of them. I only did the small business because the other ones cost too much money, and I was like,
AA,
the small business.
there's other means of getting certifications out here.
And so how do we
Yeah.
know about it, right?
Yeah.
For someone who's 25 years versus like 5 years.
Well, I didn't know when I first started even, but I
Yeah.
think there's some wonderful programs in the district, through the Department of Small and Local Business Development. You just have to go there and get the information. Obviously, it's not here, but a lot of times it is.
Yeah, thank you. I reached out to them in DC.
Give me specific ideas of tax measures that would help smaller businesses, that would cover African-American businesses, recognizing that we may not like it, but constitutionally, we cannot target. It was all the way back to a case called Croson in the late 80s, that you can't, much as we would like, and they're getting ready to do it with affirmative action in general, but you can't target specific help. So any ideas on how you could do it by a class of businesses that would benefit businesses, let's say, over in our a
That's a really good question. I'm not a tax person at all, but I think what you just mentioned, doing a mapping of the type of businesses that I would say Black and migrant families most likely own, and looking at equitable systems and incentives for those businesses, and um, how there can be greater kind of partnerships with some of the bigger businesses that are coming in, and tax incentives for maybe bigger businesses to invest in some of the smaller businesses, to really invest in the small businesses in more meaningful ways than what's happening now. As you know, space is extremely tight and is extremely expensive. It's really expensive for a lot of small businesses in general, particularly Black businesses, to afford rental space. It's just very extremely difficult for them to afford it, and then to maintain it. And a lot of them are like, we don't want to just rent, we also want to have the opportunity to purchase the building that we're in so that we can generate additional wealth in that way. So how can there be more incentives for larger businesses? We could just say, Brick, who's developing half of Ward 8, to invest in more partnerships and ownership opportunities with small businesses from those communities that they're impacting in ways that's going to be beyond like the community benefits agreement, which is very, very, small change. It's not anything that's going to make impact. But if I was to have a contract with you for X amount of years, that's going to be guaranteed work plus significantly reduced rent, or et cetera, that's going to make an opportunity for me to really grow my business from a 1 or 2 person to 3, 4, 5, and continue to progress. So how can we use some of the bigger businesses to incentivize them to really, really go into a more equitable partnership with smaller businesses? That's not just the community benefits, because that's it just kind of, it's like, oh, we do that through the community or benefits, or we do that through First Source, and it just kind of uses those 2 programs, and then no one is actually monitoring and trying to hold people accountable. So how can we do it at this end, to incentivize them? And I come from abundance. Like, there is an abundance, and when you see those type of partnerships, you see more abundance starting to happen. So.
I wonder if anybody, just any of you want to like say a few more words about some of the proposals. I mean, I heard there were a lot that were thrown out. So we had child tax credit, making sure EITC gets to undocumented workers. I've heard taxing extreme wealth, taxing high value homes. So I just wonder if anybody wants a chance to kind of say more about their proposals.
I have one that didn't come up that, really, when I heard it, my teeth almost fell out. My husband and I went to update our wills, and the lawyer told us, I'm not the most numbers person, but it was something like he had 5 million and I had 5 million. We don't have that money, but if we did, our kids would inherit 10 million completely exempted from any estate tax. That's mind-boggling. We talk about how important it is that people should work for their money, right? And that's why that's like why we have an EITC program. And then we like just make this massive giveaway. So if we're talking about increasing taxes on wealth, which, as I've said before, is something that people can easily afford and should be affording, and we should be sacrificing for our community. And some people might even laugh and say, what kind of sacrifice is it if you already have millions or hundreds of thousands? But setting that aside, we should be stepping up. And I would love to see the estate tax exemption just drop tremendously. And if I'm not mistaken, it was only like $1 million, even. This is something.
So is it like this could be a some type of tax, way that homeowners, that majority, we have a lot of renters in the city, a lot of renters who are of different classes, different ethnicities, but as a way to be a little bit more there. I don't know if it exists.
Do you have one? So we have a circuit breaker or something, Schedule H, apply for it. Taxes here, file it, do it. But it is credit that goes to renters and homeowners when property taxes that rent an owner exceed a certain share of their income. But we did hear from an expert from the Lincoln Land Institute of Policy, Institute of Land Policy, about that circuit breaker and the different ways that we could expand it actually to make it a better support to folks in the district and to try and keep people in their homes and to not have people having to like move around to find cheaper housing. So, and there are some ways that that credit is sort of inequitably affecting people with similar incomes, but who, like for homeowners, where the value of their home is vastly different depending on where they live. So that is one thing that's on the list to look at to potentially expand and improve.
Hey, Erica, can I chime in real quick because I have to hop off? And I apologize. So I'll be really quick. So two things. I wanted to respond to something that came up in another session around, I think the hotel industry brought up about the law that was passed that requires the hotels to report if there's any type of action or rally that's happening around their area and allows the guests to make a decision if they want to come or don't want to come. So one thing I want to say towards that is that also is a benefit for unionized hotels. So we just had a number of unions that had conferences here. I know ATU will be bringing a large number of national people here next week, and they will only stay at unionized hotels. I have a number of unions that have conferences in Maryland that bring their workers and the people that are coming into the area to stay in DC because DC has the large percentage of unionized hotels. So that ability to tell someone if there is a labor dispute or a rally that is happening around their hotel isn't so much punitive if you look at it as there are people that come to DC because they want to be a part of progressive movement, or we have 100 people that will be barking on the mall and they want to know that they're staying at a unionized hotel. So I want to make sure that as there was one side that was punitive that was presented to that ability for a guest to identify if there is a labor dispute or a rally or action happening in the area of the vicinity that they're saying. It's also a benefit for people that are traveling here to come to those types of events. And I would love for the hotel industry to see how many unionized conferences, conventions, efforts actually contribute to them increasing the numbers of rooms that are being taken. So that's one thing that I want to add. But just to close, to say that we know that when people are paid more, they pay higher taxes. And we know that we are here to look at the tax structure and how do we keep people actually living in the city and not being paid more than going out of the city. So I think we should be looking at where the opportunities that we can create for people that have lived here for years, the government workers, the teachers, the professionals, to be able to work and live in the city. And we should be looking at that with our tax policy, but all the policies that we create here and out. So I just want to say that I look forward to responding to other efforts and digging in deeper to offer some more concrete responses to policies as they arrive in the next stages of the report. So thank you all so much for having me.
Thanks, Deanna.
I'm not sure I have a thing on particularly the proposals, and I guess I want to reflect on the fact that, I did some somewhat levels of basic research and talking to our members about like their personal experiences. And that's what this group brings, right? We're a grassroots panel. We bring not necessarily expertise in tax policy, but we bring the experiences of the people that we organize or work with. And I think what was so interesting is outside of the campaign to raise income taxes a few years ago, you know, even for JUFJ's members who primarily are people with a college degree, you know, like literacy in all levels, like these issues are hard to talk about. And I think you know, I have like, even myself have like a nervousness to be like, ooh, I want to talk more about why we should tax high value homes. And I don't feel like an expert in it at all. And all I can talk about is the fact that, you know, different people I know are purchasing homes or apartments or trying to, and like, they're all ending up paying very similar levels of property tax. And that seems bad, right? Like the people who are purchasing the 1 or 2 bedroom are paying way too close a level to the people who are purchasing like 5 bedroom houses. But I don't know enough about it. And I think what I want to reflect on is, you know, there's been these outreach sessions, there's a couple of public sessions for input. And I think one of the asks I really want to make of the commission is it doesn't feel like it's quite enough to just ask people to come and testify. I think most people feel really alienated by even trying to talk about this because they think they have to be a tax expert or they have to be an expert on the issue. And I'm really wanting to think like how, you know, we can support that outreach to be more educational is the right word, but like what are the base blocks people need to have a good conversation? How can we create more comfortable spaces for them to have that conversation? How can we have more neighborhood conversations? Is it something with ANCs that they can, you know, be given toolkits to take to their communities? Is it something with council members? Because is it working with trusted partners? Because I think a lot of people I talk to, and again, these are JFJ people who actually have testified previously on taxes. They're like, yeah, but this is kind of hard. I need a lot more time, a lot more support to be able to testify on this. And so I'm interested to hear from the commission if there are thoughts of how are we going to really be much more proactive about going out into the community. And I appreciate that the breadth of these panels have been really good. There is definitely a breadth of opinion, but it still feels at like quite a distance from most people who live in the district. And I think, you know, in organizing, we learn how to get someone to tell their story and how to share their experience. And I feel like there are some tools that we could perhaps share to get people to do that for this commission that, you know, needs some time and resource to be able to happen. And I would love
What more you think we could do?
I think one thing about like just holding public.
Part of me, I'm gonna be honest with you, part of me says, what more can we do in that way, asked in a dispassionate way? So we can have an argument. Let me ask you, what more can we do? I mean, we send out notices, we send out agencies, we go all different parts of the city. What more are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think what I'm trying to say is like, just having an input session is actually quite a high barrier to access. Most people.
So how can we do it differently where we could get more access?
Yeah, so I think a couple things I mentioned. One is like, there's some work for ANCs. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but like, you know, what would it look like to do a session with ANCs being like, could you hold a workshop in your ward, in your smaller communities with people that, you know, you're working with to get more input? Perhaps I think that's one thing. And I think about this idea of a trusted partner. When the government, often when the DC government does outreach for programs, they'll hire or work with a community organization to do the outreach. Why is that good? It's good for many reasons, but one of them is those community organizations are trusted partners. How can we have trusted partners in the community be doing that outreach and gathering data for the commission beyond just public input sessions? I'm not saying you guys are a scary bunch, but you know, people don't know you personally. And the last thing I would say is, you know, again, going back to like what we do as organizers, it's often hard if you say, can you give me a 3-minute testimony on this? People are like, that's not something most people ever spend time doing. You know, we're trained advocates, we know how to write testimony. I train people to write testimony. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of energy. It's the middle of budget season. And I think there's activities and exercises you can do with a group of 30 people to get them to a place where they can share a story that will actually be really useful for you. But that does take a lot more energy. And again, there are groups in this room and in other panels who I think would be willing to do that with the right time and resource. But I think it needs to be higher touch. It needs to have more trusted partners in the community doing it. And it needs to be not just people having to testify, but like actually different opportunities for access other than that as well.
Well, you could also tell folks about the virtual town hall that we're having.
And we are, yeah.
You are,
We
okay,
are,
alright.
and also it's like the middle of budget season. and-
I know, yeah, it's a hard time.
Yeah,
We plan on doing more,
that's great,
and we're gonna think about how we can partner with community organizations
great.
and
And
get more people engaged.
I think we are trying to do more, and one of the points that Mayor Williams has made is that we would ideally like this to be not just an opportunity to get input from the community, but also a two-way street where we're providing information to the community that they in turn can reflect on and digest and then build on it and turn that back around. Okay, now that I know more about it, here's what I think about it. Yeah, there's, to some extent, this is a bandwidth and a timing challenge, as you said, it's budget season and we have to have our recommendations by the end of the year. So I already can say, all right, we are not going to do as good a job on this as we would like. I do think we are learning quite a bit, and possibly one of the legacies we can leave behind is some reflections on, okay, here's what we did well, here's what we didn't do as well, here's what maybe needs to be done in the next 10 years so that over time, we're building the muscle memory as a city and as a government and as a community to be able to do a better job going forward. So I think those observations are really helpful, and that sort of criticism is helpful. Carolyn.
Are you sure? Yes, thank you. I wanted to build a little bit on some of Yael's ideas. To say not just that it's hard to help people understand that they actually have a stake in this. At Fair Budget, our executive director, Nakaya Mujahid, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, she always says the budget is everyone's business, which is really a very powerful thing that I think is really applicable also to the tax code. The tax code is everyone's business. But people don't feel that. And it takes a lot of work to help them understand how they do have a stake. And so I would even just say that it's not about having us come and give recommendations so much as it is have people show up and listen to what their needs are, and then let tax experts say, this is how we meet those needs. In the same way that a healthcare system might want to hear from really sick people, but not expect them to say, here's what I need the health system to do policy-wise. This is really tricky stuff. And I've been really trying to devote a lot of my time over the past 7 years to tax policy, but I am still super far from being a tax expert. So I just want to say that the important part is what people's lived experiences in our society is, much more than them being able to say, I want this policy and that policy and that policy, because frankly, we're not going to get that. And there are experts who do that work.
Thank you.
Can I ask, we put material on our website, like backgrounders, with the intent to educate the public and get more people engaged. Did anybody look at those? Okay. But, maybe you could take a look and be like, the backgrounders are effective, or do it differently, or.
Are they infographics? Because I love an infographic.
Yeah, maybe.
Still pretty dense.
Yeah, we should do more on that.
I mean, one of the things we heard from a person who attended the session on Monday night at the ARC was that we rely way too much on social media and email to get the word out about things, and that there was no one out there knocking on doors in the neighborhood or handing out flyers or doing some of the things that help to reach folks that are just not glued to their computers in the same way, or their phones in the same way the rest of us are. So we have a small microcosm of people that we're hitting when we're tweeting about a virtual event. And I bet our attendance will show that that's the case, just like it did with the AMCs. I also think we need to think about the Yael's point with schedule and what makes sense. Come on in, you guys. And try and set up some of our remaining sessions at times that work for other people, not just this group of commissioners, right? Because I think Like I heard from some ANCs or saw some folks tweeting that, we had scheduled the ANC session at a time of ANC meetings, and so they weren't gonna show up because they had their own meetings at the same time. That's just, we're sort of
Yeah.
shooting ourselves in the foot there, so maybe we should.
I think we're just finishing up the prior session, so.
One more comment. As we sit around the table and talk about racial equity and justice, we talk about underserved neighborhoods. At some point, we have to, and this question I'm going to pose anyway, look at, education and what role that plays in employment. So are there any recommendations with regards to tax or tax incentives around education, be it on the part of the employee or the employer? Because I think we all understand that education plays a key role in increasing the wages, the income of the people that are affected the most by these inequities.
I don't know if I fully understand your question. Are you asking if we have ideas on tax credits that should be given for someone to go
For
to school?
educational purposes, yes, to get our workforce up, so that they can be higher wage.
I think something like that is a great idea, and something like that coupled with working with unions who have apprenticeship programs could go even further because folks would have more support in whatever field they're going in. So I think that's,
I'm just looking for ideas.
yeah, that's, I'm sharing an idea.
Education is excellent, way of trying to resolve some of
Yeah.
these issues.
When you think about some of the things that need to be done around the city, how can, like pipe removal, the building of buildings, are there ways to work with unions to get some sort of apprenticeship program and have a tax incentive that is for the person who's working as well as for the businesses? But we need to be clear about who's getting the benefit. And is that then moving people who are in low wage jobs, moving to higher wage jobs because they're getting those certifications and credits? And are we increasing the union force as a result of it? So I think there could be a couple of milestones that could be tracked as we do that. I also wanted to add a comment about the meeting. So I want to say first, thank you for inviting me to speak today. I did give my full statement in, so I hope I take the time to read it. And I think it would be advantageous for us to think about a way to do a series of meetings in the community, Spaces in Action. Our members, leaders, our organizers are willing to help coordinate meetings. We work in unison with Fair Budget Coalition, DC Fiscal Policy Institute, JUFJ, and many other organizations around DC. I don't think anyone would say no to supporting, creating a space for people who live in DC to be able to talk about their experiences and their ideas. I don't feel like you expected us to come in here and say, do this particular policy. What I'm hearing you say is, what are the ideas you have based on the experiences that you know of, right? And I believe that if we create space in the community for folks to come and share their stories, we won't say testimonies, share their stories and ideas of how things can be better. It doesn't matter if they have a degree or not a degree. Their lived experience oftentimes allows them to say what is working and what is not working. And to be in a space with people who have more information, that is going to make everyone smarter. So why don't we figure out a way to do something like that? I commit as Spaces in Action is willing to help make that happen.
Thank you.
Going back to what you said, I don't have the answer to that question, but that's a very good question, yeah. Just because, illiteracy east of the river is 50%, adult illiteracy is 50%. And when you talk to the Workforce Development Coalition, the one thing that they've told us is the number one barrier to workforce development is actually illiteracy. It's not drug tests, it's not background, it's not, those are barriers that we need to address, but the number one for in DC that they're experiencing is illiteracy. So I would highly recommend reaching out to UDC. They have a workforce development center on Martin Luther King. She's on the board. So Dr. Rashonda Smith, who's over down at UDC, she can really has a lot of good ideas on how to tackle the 50% illiteracy through workforce development, and maybe get some ideas on how those tax incentives and programs and make sure those who are benefiting the most. And so, and the other thing I like that they're doing, or at least under the previous president, is looking at like from the boom to 20. Current president, yes, from the womb to 21, and not just
Yes.
looking at, you know, with the whole pipeline. And at every level, what is it that you need to get through to whatever you're trying to achieve, college, a trade, entrepreneurship, or whatever. So I would, yeah, recommend tapping into UDC and some of their partners and Anacostia High School, because they have a really good program with them, and hearing what the students and youth have to say in this conversation as well. And just getting back to some of the like community interventions. You know, we say this a lot, ANCs, we get 100 emails a day. A lot of them are flyers. We don't even know if it's targeted at us, if it's for us or whoever. So, I will just say, remember, ANCs are our unpaid, volunteers to the public. Making our jobs easier is a whole lot. So one, even just asking to present at the ANC meeting to explain why is this important, and just drumming up some interest from people. Doing something in Ward 8 with the council member's office is gonna increase the attendance by far. It'll take you triple it to whatever you're trying to do. And when the council member White did the budget roundtable, it was no more space left in the ARC. It was so many people, and it was like a couple days notice. It wasn't like a whole bunch of, he tweeted it out, sent some text messages, and then went in his newsletter. So those partnerships are important too with folks who are trusted, because they're gonna reach the tenant associations, they're gonna reach the grassroots, they're gonna reach the activists, the everyday people, and then making it informational too. Like you said, we need to learn, and doing something more interactive and like a workshop, and thinking about how to put people in little groups and talk about it in different ways that's not like tax led, because that's very scary. But if you're framing around like 10 years, look at racial equity and how to stay in the city or something like that, to really make it connected with people and say, oh, this is why it matters to me. But even getting an email on tax, like if I didn't get it from Erica, I probably would have ignored it. It's like, I don't know what this is. This is not for me. I don't know anything about tax policy. So it's just meeting people where we are and using the same language we use. And then getting like Big G or, you know, one of the go-go stars to tweet it out for you. Seriously, though, no one's following, sorry, the DC tax commissioners. They are, for essence, they are following EU. They are following Wale and other influencers. You know, it's other people they are following. So just thinking about how to reach a more diverse network.
That's right.
They are on social media, but they're just not following the same.
That's really helpful. Thank you. You had a point.
That's okay.
Okay. We are pretty, just about at time, which is, this has been an amazing conversation. So time has gone really fast. I do have a couple of follow-up questions for you, but I'll pick it separately. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts about the tipped wage issue, because it's something we heard about and interested in impact on workers. Probably other things as well. And one other pitch I'll make is that you talk about bringing stories of impact. A number of you, some of you talked about child tax credit and the EITC, and obviously that's a policy that has been in effect. Right? We have the federal child tax credit, we have the EITC increasing, and so I think the more we could hear, and we've heard statistics about the impact on poverty, but getting that real world experience from folks who have directly been impacted by that would be, I think, a helpful addition to the conversation that we haven't really had yet. So
We have those stories.
we can talk about those. We should figure out a way to get that into the record.
I think you should record it and taking comments on.
That would be wonderful.
That would be
I know you so well, yeah, so. That note, thank you so much. Really.
All right, thank you.